uh, from the Lankavatara Sutra, things are not what they seem, nor are they otherwise. So, how do we really see what's real? We have a lot of thoughts about what's real, and we have a lot of stories about what's real for us individually and as a culture, as a world and community. So, how do we listen without an opinion really gets there? It's about all the stories we tell ourselves about the way things are supposed to be. And listening without an opinion is fundamental. Just listen, just see, just taste, whatever it is. And the three marks have really hit home for me personally. So, very deeply since losing my beloved Junko, I've been off, easily distracted, sad, unmoored, very vulnerable, exhausted. It's sort of like being in free fall. You know, there's always these great Zen stories. You climb up the pole, and then you reach higher and jump. Okay. Everything's theory until the next person or you are shot. So that's when the rug gets pulled out. And that's when we have great opportunity. So there is a interesting thing about what happens to a brain when grieving. And they've done MRI studies to look and see what's different. And on functional MRIs, it looks at the activity of the brain. And with some emotions, one or two areas light up. But with grief, a whole lot of areas light up. Imagery, vision, memory, memory, more distracted. All these things are physical changes in the brain when grieving. Our tears or even take on a different shape. So it's very much a somatic thing. We need to work with body to do that. So real appreciative of Zenshin's wonderful Qigong and movement. So thank you. So this is really about impermanence, which is what brings most of us to practice, is some discomfort, some realization. And it's really the great matter, the whole contemplation of the great matter. And I know I've told this story before, but it just cracked me up. When I Googled the great matter, what showed up was Henry VIII's conundrum about what to do with his marriage to his first wife so he could get married to Anne Boleyn. So there's even different opinions about what the great matter is, depending on where you are. So that I couldn't believe that. It's like, oh, I guess that was a great matter, one way or another. So for us, the great matter is life and death, birth, death, and what the heck do we do in between all this stuff? And how do we cope with it all? Constant change. Even the Han at Daibusatsu, and for those of you who've been there, if you look at it, It's a big, wonderful piece of wood that has a lot of Japanese writing on it. And it's got a very deep hole in it from all the whacking. And what the Japanese writing says is, be aware of the great matter of life and death. Life passes swiftly. Wake up, wake up. Do not waste this life. So it's really about living life. Because as we all know, as we get older, that Han goes faster and faster and faster. And even our sense of time changes. What was yesterday seemed like yesterday might have been 20 years ago. So even that's fluid. So impermanence, nothing lasts. And basically comes down to anything can happen at any time, at any moment, at any second. Stuff happens. I was walking my daughter's dog the other day, and one of our neighbors was also walking, and we stopped to chat. And she had a mask on and didn't have gloves, but frequently she wears gloves. And she asked me if I got my COVID booster. And I said, yeah, and I did just fine with it. And she was saying she keeps trying to avoid it and has all these things that she does to try to avoid it, which are all good ideas. But she was going a bit overboard, spraying her mail at this point. So, but that was my opinion, but it constricted her and she was really frightened. And so I saw how frightened she was. So we chatted a bit about that. And so it's sort of like how we try to control things so much. It doesn't mean to not use discernment and wisdom, but it's sort of like being able to decide when is enough enough. And I had a car accident a few years ago that was completely out of the blue. And one of the things I did with that is, oh, it must have been my fault. Except it wasn't my fault. I said, well, where is that coming from? Well, if it's your fault, then you must have had some control over it, right? So the self-blame was like, you really had it in control and you just didn't do it. Well, incorrect, okay? So stuff happens out of the blue, impermanence. At work, I'd frequently get stuck on my computer. I mean, that was essential for me to be able to do my job. And I couldn't write orders. I couldn't check my patient in or out. And so everything would come to a stop. And I would find myself getting so annoyed with that. And yet, and then I would think, oh gosh, I remember back when I used to be able to just say an order and my nurse would do it. I didn't have to go somewhere else and type it in and then go check another box and then run back to the room. So I was getting really put out. And then I got, wow, this is impermanence. Impermanence. Things change. We're not back in the day where I can give verbal orders anymore. Okay. So a safety thing, but an inconvenience too. So everything's got two sides. So the other thing is no self. We have no permanent identity. Nothing that survives. Okay. Nothing, it's all transient. And we have no permanent identity because everything changes. So if we kind of can understand impermanence, the other two marks are related and it kind of flows through. Okay, so codependent arising, everything's related and interdependent, even the three marks and all of us. So dissatisfaction and suffering. Definitely, because life isn't permanent and nothing lasts. We don't like things, they're uncomfortable, all these things are like little deaths. When we have a tough time, it's sort of like something's dying. But something does die before something else can happen and be reborn. So day by day, everything is about living and dying. And there's a wonderful practice that I have found very helpful. And Pema Chodron talks about this. And it's if we think about something we did yesterday and kind of contemplate it a bit, and then say, that was another life. And I'm here now. Or I had oatmeal for breakfast. That was another life. And now is lunch. You know, we see this in ourselves all the time. We wake up cranky. Why is that? And then the next day we wake up and everything's fine. Another life. So all this interconnection, circumstances line up to allow something to happen. And then it happens, and that affects something else happening. But we don't always know all those things that are affecting us now, that allows something to happen. So all of us are here because of a unique bunch of stuff happened, and it's constantly happening, eternally living, eternally dying, and constantly flowing. So I like to think that difficulties are liberating. Angst is liberation. It brings the possibility of change. It kind of stirs us up. So wherever we're stuck, we get a chance to relook at. And there are some also really psychologic theories about why this happens. It's like when a big disruption happens, it cuts through all our ideas, cuts through everything. And any little bit of loose ends that we have from other things that have happened to us in the past that are kind of been put aside, managed, moved around, shut the door on, we get a chance to look at again because it feels real. So we get a chance to follow that down. Now, the idea is to feel it absolutely completely and to not push it away. So it means look, see what's there. Even if you choose to not give money to the homeless person, look the person in the eyes. Do not turn away. And so the practice, the sitting on the cushion, getting some clarity around mind is very, very important because it helps with that stability. So you can connect these things and see what's real. So it seems to be that what changes us, or what I found for myself, is the actual visceral experience. So we can kind of think a lot of stuff about what's going on and, oh, this is here and this is here, but that doesn't mean it trails down to change anything. So that's, I think, when we do the Mondo, you have to connect it and anchor it somewhere in your body so you can feel it deeply. And then what? All these things work together. So, and the experience is something that cannot be taught in books or with teachers. It may point you in a certain direction, But our job is to have the experience, because that's where the change comes. Okay, so, and it has to be explored and lived. So this I is impermanence itself in a rapidly changing, more than I'd like to know and experience, human body. Our kids grow up, we see that change. It's like, Tommy, you were just this big last year and now you're here. So that's impermanence and flow. So, and nothing exists independent of anything else. All this, and the other thing, it's more circular, not a straight line. We think like dominoes. This domino spills and then everything travels down. Well, that's true, but it's also a circle. These dominoes fell and impeded on this and this and this from all directions. And I like the analogy of water or an ocean, because at the bottom of the ocean, it's calm. There may be waves or a hurricane going on top, but the bottom's just fine. Everything's doing what it does. And being a wave on the ocean is just the wave. But sometimes when the wave gets seeing the coast and the rocks, it's like it starts seeing the other waves die what looks like a horrible death, crashing against the rocks. But maybe there's another wave that might say, hey, wait a minute, it's all water. It's just going to come back as water. So, and water takes the form of whatever container it's in. It can change into ice if it's a little cold, but it's still water. Ice, when it melts, is water. So the wave may or may not understand what's making it a wave. It could be pollution, could have thoughts about pollution, about storms, about climate change, about trash. Okay, we don't know a lot. Okay, but nonetheless, that wave's moving like us. Okay, so it sort of reminds me of fall, and it's interesting because fall is really a wonderful transition time. I love fall. It's beautiful, the colors, the leaves. And there was, when my daughter was 6, I was walking her to school, and I was never big for winter. And it was more like I had to drive 30 miles to work, and there was icy roads and you have to shovel. And my house at the time was on a corner, and I had to shovel it in the morning and shovel the driveway. So I kept thinking about, oh man, this means that winter is coming, right? Just like in Game of Thrones, winter is coming. And so I was like, oh, the leaves are falling and they're so pretty. And Caitlin looked at me and said, but Mom, if they don't fall, we can never touch them. If they don't fall, we can never touch them. So I think of that, my 6-year-old Buddha. Reminds us of how precious life is and to not waste a moment. But don't get uptight about it, because we're going to waste moments, okay? Just relax into not wasting time. How's that for a koan? So I have a poem that I wanted to share, and it's actually, there's this wonderful website called Brain Pickings, and it's just filled with all sorts of great stuff. And I came across this woman Rebecca Elson, who was an astronaut and an astronomer. And she did a lot of studies, wrote wonderful poems and books about all sorts of things. But she died when she was 40. And she really met life on her own terms. And so it takes great courage to do this. So before I kind of get into the poem, I just want to share one more thing. My family was visiting this week and we watched Cinderella. It was the 2015 version on television and with people in it. And the thing that struck me was the Cinderella that they had at the time met her life the way it was. She lost her parents. She had an evil stepmother, nasty stepsisters, and she just swept out the hearth. Even though they treated her like a servant, she did fine. Because she remembered what her mother told her. Have courage and be kind. Have courage and be kind. Kind of summed it up for me. Courage to see what's there. Go for it. Be kind. So the poem is called Antidotes to Fear of Death. Sometimes, as an antidote to fear of death, I eat the stars. Those nights lying on my back, I suck them from the quenching dark till they're all gone, all inside me, pepper hot and sharp. Sometimes, instead, I stir myself into a universe still young, still warm as blood. No outer space, just space. The light of all the not yet stars drifting like a bright mist, and all of us and everything already there, but unconstrained by form. And sometimes it's enough to lie down here on earth beside our long ancestral bones, to walk across the cobble fields of our discarded skulls, each like a treasure, like a chrysalis, thinking whatever left these husks flew off on bright wings. Gasho. Have courage and be kind.
Thank you, Vicara.